Imagine your company pulls in $56 billion in just 3 months.
Which is it's an astronomical amount of money.
Right. It's the absolute best quarter in 5 years. They shattered every analyst's expectations. And then, literally the very next morning, 8,000 of the people who helped generate that wealth wake up to find their security badges are just deactivated.
It's the ultimate corporate paradox. And, well, we are going to get to the bottom of it today.
Welcome to the deep dive. If you want to understand the hidden mechanisms behind massive shifts like this, you need to hit that like button, subscribe, follow, and turn on the notification bell right now. We do this for you, so make sure you never miss out.
Definitely do that.
But first, I have a strict 15-second update on the Martin Stevens versus OpenAI situation. As of right now, it is still not a lawsuit. We are currently in a voluntary quiet period, and that is at Martin Stevens' explicit request, just to allow the idling of new public information. Now, hopefully they're working toward a settlement in the background, but let's be absolutely clear here. We do not know if any progress has been made or if discussions are even underway. Also, the dead man's switch has not been activated, meaning Martin Stevens remains physically and legally safe.
And we are leaving it right there, just the facts.
Exactly. So transitioning sharply into today's main mission, we are looking at a stack of sources covering a massive shockwave in the tech world. Meta just laid off 8,000 global employees.
Yeah, and that includes nearly 1,400 right here in Washington State.
Yeah. So we're going to explore the massive multi-billion-dollar shift toward artificial intelligence that's driving this, the localized ripple effects that are just freezing the Seattle area housing market, and a looming WARN Act legal investigation. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because looking at the financials, the math seems entirely contradictory. I mean, Meta just reported their Q1 2026 numbers, $56.3 billion in revenue.
Which is a 33% year-over-year increase, right?
Exactly, a 33% increase. Their net income was $26.7 billion. And yet, on May 20th, they cut roughly 10% of their entire global workforce of 78,000.
You know, when you look at those numbers, the immediate assumption is that a company is either failing or thriving. Like if it's thriving, it hires. If it's failing, it fires.
Right. That's the basic logic of business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we are looking at here is a third category entirely. It's the proactive, aggressive pivot. Mark Zuckerberg's memo to the staff back in May actually highlighted this pretty clearly.
What did he say?
Well, he wrote, quote, "I feel the weight of that, acknowledging the human cost." But he immediately followed it by warning that success in the AI race, quote, "isn't a given." So he promised no more company-wide layoffs this year, but, you know, the door for targeted cuts remains wide open.
I really want to visualize this for you listening, because that standard logic of business just doesn't seem to apply here. Think about like a professional sports team that just won the championship.
Yeah.
They had a record-breaking season. They made more money in merchandise and tickets than ever before in the franchise's history. And the very next morning, the owner fires 10% of the starting roster.
Wow.
And not because they played poorly, but to take their salaries and use the cash to build a brand new experimental futuristic stadium. From the outside, you're looking at a winning team and asking, why gut the roster when you're making record profits?
That analogy gets right to the heart of the mechanism here. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you know, this is not about saving a sinking ship. It is about burning your own boats to force a new direction.
Yeah.
It's a massive reallocation of capital. Yeah. You add this recent cut to the previous 2022 to 2023 year of efficiency layoffs.
Oh, right. The year of efficiency.
Yeah, you add those together, and Meta's total cuts now exceed 30,000 employees. They're systematically unwinding the workforce that built the social media era, basically to fund the infrastructure of the AI era.
And the mechanics of how they're actually separating from these employees are incredibly intricate. Like, let's look at the severance package they offered.
Pretty substantial, isn't it?
It is. They're offering 16 weeks of base pay plus 2 additional weeks for every year of service. They're paying out all remaining PTO and covering 18 months of COBRA health insurance.
18 months. Wow, that health coverage is actually like triple what they used to offer.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a very specific clause in this separation agreement that stood out to me in the sources. It's called the non-working notice period.
Oh, yeah. It's a fascinating legal and frankly psychological tool.
Right, because these 8,000 employees are still technically on the payroll through July 22nd.
Right, but their badges are dead.
Exactly. The badges are dead, their laptop access is completely severed to protect company IP, and they are not required to work. However, and this is the catch, the agreement states that if they manage to find and accept a new role within Meta no later than 1 week before that July 22nd termination date.
The whole separation agreement is voided.
Yes. It voids the agreement, and they lose the severance package entirely.
Just think about the psychological tension that creates for the individual. Your employer just locked you out of the building. You have this guaranteed, fairly substantial lump sum payout just sitting on the table.
Right.
Do you take that money and walk away into a very uncertain tech job market? Or do you try to salvage your career by essentially interviewing for a new job at the exact same company that just deemed your previous role expendable?
It transforms an exit into this high-stakes gamble.
Exactly. And it underscores how purely transactional this restructuring is. They aren't saying, we don't want you. They're saying, we don't want to pay for the specific thing you were doing yesterday.
Which bridges us perfectly to what they do want to pay for today.
Yeah.
This brings us to the AI arms race, because we really need to shift from what Meta did to where this money is actually going.
Yeah, that's the real story.
Because throwing around the term AI layoff can be deeply, deeply misleading.
It absolutely can. The general public hears AI layoff, and they picture, like, a piece of software sitting there doing the job of an accountant or a coder.
Right, like a robot at a keyboard.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the scale of the bet Meta is making reveals a completely different reality. Meta is projecting their capital expenditures, what the industry calls CapEx, to land somewhere between $125 billion and $145 billion in 2026 alone.
For context for you listening, one of our sources pointed out that $135 billion is roughly equal to the entire gross domestic product of Kuwait.
Wow.
And Meta is spending that in a single year. I mean, that is more than double their 2025 budget.
And, that capital expenditure isn't going toward payroll. It's going into physical, heavy infrastructure.
Like what?
Well, they're building massive data centers. They're buying up land, securing power grid access, purchasing thousands of highly specialized custom silicon chips from NVIDIA, and of course, training foundation models. The cost of entry for building what Zuckerberg is calling personal superintelligence is just astronomical.
So to fund it, they didn't just lay off 8,000 people. The sources say they internally reassigned 7,000 existing employees specifically into AI division.
Yeah, and they entirely scrapped 6,000 open roles they had planned to hire for.
The internal culture shift around this must be intense, because there's a new engineering unit formed under Vice President Maher Saba, and internally the employees are calling it the draft.
The draft. Yeah, that says it all.
Right. They absorbed 2,000 employees into this unit, and from what our sources indicate, participation was not optional. You were drafted.
That militaristic nickname, the draft, really tells you everything you need to know about the lack of autonomy these workers are experiencing right now.
Yeah, it's not the fun tech vibe anymore.
Not at all. The era of move fast and break things, where engineers had endless freedom to experiment on, pet projects, that is over. This is a wartime footing.
And it's not just Meta, is it?
No, definitely not. A business professor from the University of Washington, Jeff Schulman, is quoted in our sources, noting that laying off workers to enforce efficiency is now treated as a badge of honor in the tech industry.
A badge of honor. That's bleak.
It is. Cisco, Cloudflare, Snap, they are all following this exact playbook. Cut the workforce, hoard the cash, buy the servers.
But wait, looking at an active debate from the our Seattle WA Reddit thread in our Stack, people are heavily debating the reality of this. A lot of users are assuming these 8,000 workers were literally replaced by AI.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Right. They're picturing a generative AI model writing the code that these engineers used to write. But based on how you just described the CapEx spending, that's not actually what the data is showing, is it?
No, and that is a crucial distinction to make. Data from a group called Rational FX tracked over 45,363, to be exact, global tech layoffs so far in 2026. Of those, about 20%, roughly 9,200 cuts, are directly tied to AI. But when you dig into the mechanics of those cuts, it's not a one-to-one automation replacement.
So the AI isn't doing their jobs.
Right now in 2026, no. AI is not sitting at a desk autonomously doing the jobs of 8,000 laid-off Meta workers. The company is simply firing software engineers to free up the liquid cash required to buy custom chips. The capital itself has been reassigned from human salaries to physical hardware.
So they are gutting the present to buy the future.
Exactly.
But an abstract $145 billion global corporate strategy eventually hits the ground somewhere. And for this deep dive, ground zero is Washington State.
Yeah, the geographic concentration of this global decision is stunning, really. You have a multinational corporation pivoting its entire identity, but the blunt force trauma of that pivot is highly localized to just a few zip codes.
And Washington State absorbed a massive blow. I mean, out of Meta's 7,000 local employees, 1,395 were cut. That is 20% of their regional footprint gone overnight. And it's important to understand how concentrated this is. Bellevue Spring District took the hardest hit with 699 cuts.
699 in one area.
Yeah, and Seattle offices on Dexter Avenue lost 215, Utah Avenue lost 44, and Redmond saw 206 cuts, along with 231 remote workers in the state. And remember, these are highly compensated roles: software engineers, data scientists, content designers.
If you pull back and look at the rational FX data from that Reddit source, the broader picture for the region is actually quite severe. Seattle headquartered companies account for 16,590 of the global tech layoffs this year.
16,000.
Yeah, and to put that in perspective, San Francisco sits at 9,395.
Wait, really? Seattle is that much higher than SF?
Yeah, the Seattle region is bearing the absolute brunt of this industry-wide capital shift.
Think about the functional reality of taking nearly 700 high-earning individuals out of a single neighborhood like Bellevue Spring District in one day.
It changes everything.
It's not just bad for those workers, it alters the entire ecosystem. The coffee shops, the lunch spots, the local tax revenue, all of it relies on the density of those salaries.
And we really cannot ignore the acute human toll hidden within those numbers, specifically regarding work visas. Because the mechanics of losing your job on an H-1B visa, for example, are terrifying.
It's an absolute ticking clock. For a foreign national whose U.S. work visa is sponsored by Meta, getting laid off isn't just about losing an income stream. Their very right to remain in the country is legally tied to their employment status.
Yep.
The second that badge stops working, a 60-day grace period begins. They have 60 days to not only find a new job, but find a new job willing to sponsor a visa and file all the complex Department of Labor paperwork.
In a market that just shed 45,000 tech jobs.
Exactly. Our sources note Meta directed these individuals to an alumni portal and assigned them to law firms to try and figure out their status.
It's an incredibly precarious legal limbo. You aren't just scrambling to pay rent, you're scrambling to prevent the uprooting of your entire life. It is a stark reminder of the extreme vulnerability of local economies and individual lives when they become entirely dependent on a single industry's corporate strategy.
Which is exactly why job losses of this magnitude do not happen in a vacuum. The sheer speed of this pivot, the sudden extraction of wealth and stability from a specific localized area creates an immediate vacuum.
Right.
And the first place you see that vacuum materialize is in the housing market.
Oh, always. Housing is always the first domino to fall because it is entirely driven by consumer confidence and future stability. Sheriff El Baswani, a real estate expert analyzing this specific fallout, points out that the housing markets in King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties are inextricably linked to tech sector confidence.
I look at the localized housing market during a mass layoff, like a giant game of musical chairs.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Because when the music stops, when tech hiring freezes, it's not just the people without chairs who freeze. Obviously, the people who are laid off can't buy a house. But the mechanism of fear means everyone else in the room stops dancing too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even if you still have your job at Meta or Amazon or Microsoft, your vibe has completely changed. You are suddenly looking over your shoulder to see if you're next, instead of looking at Zillow to upgrade your home.
That psychological freeze is exactly what the real estate data is currently showing. And we have to factor in the macroeconomic environment as well.
Yeah.
As of March 12, 2026, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate was hovering around 6.11%.
Okay.
So you have a situation where employed people are wearing golden handcuffs. They're locked into the 3% interest rates they secured years ago.
Oh, I see.
Right, and they're terrified to trade that in for a 6% rate when their job security feels so fragile.
Albaswani's analysis highlights how this plays out functionally. He notes that buyers are simply pausing their plans, saying, let's wait 6 months and see what happens. As a result, we are seeing stale listings pile up.
Just sitting on the market.
Yeah, sitting there. The luxury and move-up housing markets are feeling the pinch first because nobody wants to stretch their budget right now. Even the outer ring commute areas, places like Puyallup, Snoqualmie, and Marysville, which usually see influxes of tech workers looking for more space, they're noticeably cooling down.
The causality is so clear, isn't it? The corporate board in Menlo Park decides to shift $145 billion to custom silicon chips. That forces the termination of an engineer in Bellevue.
Yeah.
That engineer's sudden loss of income, multiplied by thousands, creates a localized panic that forces a home builder in Snohomish to drop the asking price on a new construction project. The economic ripples are just massive.
But the ripples aren't just economic. The sheer speed of Meta's pivot has also triggered legal tripwires. Which brings us to the WARN Act investigation currently unfolding in Washington state.
This is a big one.
It is. And for you listening, I want to be extremely clear. We are remaining strictly impartial on this. We are not taking the side of the investigating law firm, and we are not taking the side of the corporation. We are just impartially breaking down the facts of the investigation as laid out in the legal sources provided.
Right. So a leading class action law firm, Strauss Borelli, PLLC, has launched an investigation into Meta's actions in Washington regarding these specific 1,400 layoffs.
For those who might not be familiar with the mechanism of this law, the WARN Act, which stands for Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, is a federal law from 1988.
Right.
It was designed to prevent the exact kind of ambush we sometimes see in corporate restructuring. It requires employers with 100 or more employees to provide 60 days written notice before a mass layoff.
And the logic there is to give workers, their families, and the local economy sufficient time to transition, right, to seek new employment or enter retraining programs.
Exactly. And this is where that non-working notice period we discussed earlier intersects with federal law. Ah, yes.
Because when a company wants to pivot instantly, when they want to cut access to company data today, but avoid violating a 60-day notice law, they utilize this payroll buffer. Looking at the timeline provided in the sources, Meta notified the Washington Employment Security Department and the employees on May 20th.
Right. And their badges were deactivated immediately.
Immediately. However, their official termination date, where the paychecks actually stop, is July 22nd.
Which is exactly 63 days later.
Yep. So they are keeping them on the books just past that 60-day legal threshold. The law firm, Strauss Borelli, is actively investigating whether Meta's specific execution of this timeline, the notice provided, or the severance terms violated the stipulations of the WARN Act.
And if an investigation finds that an employer circumvented the rules, the penalty often involves paying back wages and benefits for the period of the violation.
Exactly. And again, just to remain strictly neutral here, this is currently an investigation, not a confirmed violation or formal lawsuit. But the very existence of the investigation highlights how phenomenally complex a mass layoff is at this scale. You cannot quietly remove 8,000 people from an ecosystem. There are massive legal, economic, and psychological layers that have to be untangled.
It's incredible to step back and look at the whole board. You
Yeah.
have $145 billion in capital moving violently in one direction, while 8,000 human lives are disrupted and sent scrambling in another.
Yeah.
And caught in the middle are the local economies, the housing markets, and the legal frameworks trying to absorb the shock wave of a single corporate decision.
It really is a profound moment of transition. We are literally watching the architecture of the next decade of technology being built in real time, but we are also bearing witness to the immediate, heavy, real-world cost of financing its construction.
So bringing this back to you, the listener, we've spent this time breaking down Meta's strategy and Seattle's local fallout, but the sources make it clear this is a global cross-industry trend. How might these kinds of AI-driven capital shifts impact your own industry?
That's a great question to ask.
Are you already seeing companies in your sector hoarding cash, sacrificing human resources today so they can afford the technology of tomorrow? It is a stark reality where the abstract pursuit of future technology has very real, very heavy present-day consequences for our communities.
And if we follow this trend to its logical conclusion, it raises a much larger, almost philosophical question.
Yeah.
It isn't explicitly answered in these sources, but it is the elephant in the room.
What is it?
Well, if massive tech companies are willing to gut their own workforces during periods of record-breaking $56 billion quarterly revenues simply to afford the foundational infrastructure for artificial intelligence.
Right.
What happens to the global workforce once that AI infrastructure is actually finished and fully operational?
Wow, that is the $145 billion question. If they're cutting 10% just to buy the tools, what happens when the tools are turned on? Something for all of us to seriously mull over as we watch this new era unfold. That is all for today's deep dive. If you found this breakdown valuable and you want to keep understanding the hidden why behind the headlines, please hit that like button, subscribe to the show, follow us on your favorite platform, and tap that notification bell. We want you with us when we unpack the next big story. Thanks for exploring with us, and we'll see you next time.